Mina? What are you doing? Mina Montessario yanks the ship's controls hard to the left and sends the dead reckoning into a desperate barrel roll. At least this time both she and Cadmus are firmly strapped in. Arcane weapons fire from the diving Dominion Warbirds scores the underside of the little vessel, but fails to land a direct hit. Keeping us alive! At least I hope so. Mina growls through gritted teeth, sweat standing out on her brow as her piloting skills are put to the ultimate test. With our shields burned out, we've got no chance but to try and outfly them above the cloud layer. We can only hope those aircraft I contacted are free staters, and that they're feeling especially helpful. Put your faith in thrice-blessed Anchor, Cadmus replies, almost mechanically, though even he is having a hard time sounding pious whilst being bounced around like a ragdoll by Mina's improvised combat piloting. I'd much rather put my faith in our cannons, Mina fires back. If we don't kill them, they're going to kill us, and what's left of Barbican is being about as helpful as a butter sunshade. From behind them, the avatar that was Barbican responds.
The assessment continues. Immediate circumstances inconsequential. This unit's survival inconsequential. Reactivation of the Doomspire network will proceed, regardless.
Mina pulls the dead reckoning into a steep climb through a hail of enemy weapons fire, heaving on the controls with all her strength. See what I mean? I don't suppose you'd care to reconsider. We could really use some return fire about now. Cadmus, torn between his sworn vows and his desire to protect his friend, can only bow his head in defeat. Faith in blessed Anchor it is, then. I really hope he's listening. Hello and welcome to The Lone Adventurer, an actual play solo RPG podcast with me, Carl White. I will be your narrator, your game master, and your guide as we follow our heroes on their journey into the unknown. For this game, I will be using the Warbirds rule set, as well as a variety of other systems, tools, and tables as they take my fancy. A word of warning. The following scenes may contain mature themes and disturbing imagery. Listener discretion is advised. The adventure continues. Last time on The Lone Adventurer. 3 Free State Warbird pilots, Blue Flight, encountered enemy fighters over the open void sea. Trailing the damaged aircraft back to their launch ship, Snake Eyes and his team discovered 2 freighters escorted by a drop carrier. As they approached, 9 Dominion Warbirds were scrambled, but Blue Flight were not the target. These predators were hunting different prey, namely Mina Montessario's ship, the Dead Reckoning. I mentioned last time that in a solo RPG, we have far greater freedom than we might in a group game to change things up. To jump, at whim, between characters, places, or even entire game systems. In fact, we can consider all of those things to be simply modular components of our gaming toolkit, to be slotted into or out of our games as the story, or the mood, or the fun dictates. The most important rules of any game, it could be argued, don't reside within the actual rule set of that game. A game's meta rules are those unspoken or unwritten rules that govern player behavior beyond the explicit rules of the game itself. The social contract that is established consciously or subconsciously between players and creates a magic circle between them. When we apply that thinking to a solo game and realize that the only contracting that we need to do is with ourselves, the potential play space opens out exponentially. we have complete control and complete flexibility of content, all in service to those meta rules we have put in place. In fact, the focus can become less on what we include and more on what we actually leave out. What are my meta rules for the lone adventurer? Well, like many people who play games, solo or otherwise, I find that quite a hard thing to articulate. It requires fairly deep thought to analyze what I'm actually doing, what I want and what I don't want from the game that I'm playing. I just kind of do it, instinctively knowing what is right. But some self-reflection can be useful. By examining our meta rules for a game, we can gain clarity on what is possible within the space that we've created. We can create the potential for new ways of thinking. All of this is a rather long-winded way of saying I've had a bit of a think, and I've realized I can do something odd and unusual at this point in my story. Not satisfied with bending blades in the dark out of shape last season by running multiple simultaneous scores, I've decided to try out a new experiment. I want to try and run 2 different RPG systems in parallel, one for each character group, and see what happens. How will they interact? Will they break, or will they synergize? I've got no idea, but I'm keen to find out. For as long as the story and my interest dictates, I plan to run Mina and crew using Starforged, as I did back at the start of this season, whilst I'm going to continue to play Blueflight using the Warbirds rule set. Actually, that's not strictly true. Since the start of Season 3, the most recent version of the Ironsworn rules have been released, Sundered Isles. This latest iteration is focused more on sailing ships travelling between islands rather than spaceships travelling between planets, and I think it's going to be a fine fit for Mina's adventures. Let's play to find out.
Well, boss, what's the call?
Snake Eyes, who had been torn before that desperate request for asylum, now has all the excuse he needs.
Blueflight, keep formation tight on me and stay sharp. Keep the sun at our backs. We're going in. Pick your targets.
He commands, his voice calm and steady. Backfire's laughter crackles through the comms, apparently unfazed by the numerical disadvantage they face.
Good. This day was turning dull. Let us roast some Dominion dogs.
As one, Blueflight dives, engines howling, Warbird wing struts groaning under the strain. Their ambush is devastating. Intent upon their solitary target, the Dominion Warbirds remain completely unaware of the danger until Blueflight's weapon fire tears into them. 3 enemy planes erupt in smoke and flames in the opening instant of the attack, and then Blueflight are in among the pack, wheeling and looping in behind enemy planes as their foes scramble in panic.
I'm on the leader,
Gadget says, cool and confident in the midst of the apparent chaos. There is no conscious thought as she precisely tracks the multiple complex vectors, anticipating enemy pilot responses before they've even considered them. There is no awareness of the icy bite of a howling wind, the roar of her engine, or the 1,000 tiny sounds of protesting wood and canvas as her Warbird sings. She simply lets her instincts take over, leading her through the aerial dance, and the result is as effortless as it is breathtaking. The element of surprise, combined with the League pilot's superior skills, leaves 2 more Dominion Warbirds spiralling down towards the cloud layer. And even though Backfire overshoots his target and exposes himself momentarily to frantic hostile fire, he easily evades it by pulling back hard on the stick and looping up and over his attacker. His cannons open up, and another enemy aircraft is raked with lacerating fire. In a matter of mere moments, the 9-strong enemy flight is reduced to 3.
What did I tell you?
Backfire roars over the pounding of his guns. His scarf flaps in the wind behind him.
We give these Dominion cars a whipping.
But Snake Eyes has spotted what the big Urian has not.
Stay sharp, Backfire, and watch your six,
he calls as he tries to make sense of what he's seeing. The entire top sections of each of the two heavy freighters are opening up, folding back tight against the airship's sides to reveal the multiple anti-aircraft batteries concealed within. Gadget whistles as she comes about, half an eye on the enemy fighters and half on this newly emerging threat. Realization dawns.
Those aren't freighters, Snake Eyes. They're bombardment frigates. It's a trap.
Blue Flight's sending stones crackle on an open channel.
Free States aircraft, this is Captain Ryland of the DSS Intrepid. You are outnumbered and you're outgunned. Disengage and you will be allowed to go free. Interfere with our retrieval mission and you will be destroyed. This is your only warning. You have 20 seconds to comply.
So, as if things weren't lively enough already, Mythic felt the need to throw more spice in my soup. The plan was to play out the dogfight as intended, but when I rolled for my scene list, Mythic had this to say.
The scene is interrupted in relation to the current context. Here is a meaning. Lure completion.
Lure completion? Well, that seemed pretty obvious. This was a trap. Those freighters were no normal cargo ships, and instead were disguised anti-aircraft weapon platforms. Wonderful. Thank you, Mythic.
You're welcome.
On the plus side, this does mean that I get to experiment with the Warbirds' strafing rules, which the book assures me are absolutely deadly. So good luck, Blue Flight. It appears as though things have just become a great deal more perilous. Which is actually a good thing. I hadn't anticipated just how much more powerful my starting PC Warbirds would be against enemy fighters. They made mincemeat of that first encounter back in the previous episode, and they've just torn through the bulk of an enemy force that outnumbered them 3-1 without taking a single scratch. Now, admittedly, that is in part because ambushes in this game are supremely deadly. If you pull one off, you get to fire on the enemy against significantly reduced defense, and without the risk of return fire. In this case, 3 enemy aircraft were down before they knew what hit them. But even in the second round of combat, where both sides were dogfighting, the enemy was torn to shreds. That's because the enemy aircraft and their pilots are just weaker than the PC aircraft and pilots. And it's only been by playing through this encounter that I've discovered just by how much. This is a very handy use case for solo RPGs. Take an unfamiliar system and run an encounter through it to see how it ticks. It's one thing to read rules on a page, and quite another to actually play through them and see them in action. Solo gaming as a method of gaining system experience ahead of a group game and calibrating encounter difficulty should not be underestimated. But enough Warbirds and Mythic for now. We started this episode with Mina getting a weak hit on a react under fire move. Thankfully, she got a strong hit on her withstand damage roll, which kept her damage to a minimum. But she is still in a bad spot. Let's get back to her, and to the Sundered Isles rules, which have no need for Mythic's chicanery, and see how she's getting on. Elation has turned to horror aboard the Dead Reckoning as the enemy fighters break from their engagement and the true nature of their pursuers stands revealed. Mina? I see them, Cadmus. 7 helpers, those airships are heavy bombers, just like the Barbican. The AA batteries on both frigates, as well as those on the drop carrier, swivel as one to target Blue Flight and open up an overwhelming barrage of arcane fire lighting up the sky. Those League aircraft will be torn to shreds, Cadmus groans, his head in his hands. We have to help them. I agree, and I think I have a plan, but you're not going to like it. I'm going to need you on those guns, Cadmus, or we're all dead.
Mina,
Mina cuts across him. Listen, Cadmus, I know you have your vows, and that you're sworn not to take life. But if this works, we won't be killing anybody, just silencing those guns and preventing any further deaths on our side into the bargain. But I need your help, and I need it now. We're out of time. Without waiting for an answer, Mina pulls the Reckoning into a steep climb, flipping her little ship on its axis and heading directly towards the nearest frigate. Barbican, for the first time, seems to take an interest.
The instigator appears to have decided upon self-termination. Intriguing.
Mina glances back over her shoulder and scowls. Self-termination by foot, with the gunners so preoccupied on blowing those poor flyers to bits. This is our opportunity to get in close and do some real damage. We're going to take out those anti-aircraft guns. Cadmus, on my call!
It would seem, based on current relative trajectories, that you intend to eliminate your enemy's weapons by flying directly into them. Is this the instigator's intent?
If Barbican had eyebrows, Mina suspects that one would be arched right about now. No, you smug, jumped-up, mechanical misanthrope, Oh, shit! The nearest frigate, the DSS Vengeance by her markings, has been climbing and coming around to improve her firing position on the League Warbirds. Too late, Mina realizes she's flying directly into its path. The comm crackles into life, a disembodied voice yelling,
"Reckoning! Pull up! Pull up!"
But there's no time. There is a terrible, shuddering impact as the dead Reckoning plows at speed into the Dominion frigate, smashing headlong into the larger ship's gunnery deck. The little Seeker dropship comes to a complete stop, wedged fast into the Vengeance's superstructure. Cockpit lights flicker and blink out, then the background thrum of the engines cuts out a moment later. For a few seconds, there is silence, save for the groan of tortured wood and metal. Then Cadmus's voice calls up from the gun pod.
Mina? Was that part of the plan?
And things started out so well. With the Dominion fighters disengaging and the frigate's focus elsewhere, this felt like the perfect opportunity for Mina to enter the fray anew, and so she rolled plus wits and got a strong hit with a match. That result, on the enter the fray move, meant +2 momentum, bringing her to a total of +4. And also, Mina was now in control, which was going to give her access to some very useful moves. A match on the dice also triggered a positive event, and the Oracle provided me with the keywords Capture Vengeance. I figured that in this context, the frigate gunners had been overwhelmed by their desire to enact revenge upon the Warbirds who had shot down their comrades, and that Mina would have a pretty clear run at them. She had a plan, she was taking decisive action, and all was right with the world. Next, in an attempt to secure my advantage and set myself up for the killer blow, I made a gain ground move, coordinating my plan and cleverly gaining leverage. And here is where Mina's sleek black Bugatti of a plan suddenly transformed into a pink and yellow clown car, shedding wheels and engine parts and smoke, and then erupting into a comedy honking fireball, leaving nothing behind but scorched earth and rolling flaming tires. A little less prosaically, I rolled plus wits, my best stat at +3, and I rolled 1 on the dice versus a pair of 6s. Not only was that a miss, but it was a miss with a match. As well as paying the price for my failure here, there was a negative event, because, well, of course there was. The keywords for that negative event were share structure, and my pay the price roll was a 97. Roll twice, the worst possible result. The results of those two pay the price rolls were you are delayed or put at a disadvantage, and you are stressed. Taken all together, I envisaged Mina crashing into an enemy frigate and getting jammed solidly into it. I then sprinkled in some distracting banter with Barbican, just because I felt he'd been out of the limelight for a bit too long, and because, well, maybe, just maybe, the snarky Tin Man's interjection provided sufficient explanation for Mina's god-awful piloting. Good grief, I'd forgotten how absolutely brutal Starforged can be when the dice turn on you. I feel positively shell-shocked. Come back, Mythic. All is forgiven. Talking of Mythic, I think it's high time we turned back to those plucky pilots of Blue Flight. Surely things are going to go a little more smoothly for them. I'll be honest, I'm not getting my hopes up. Once again, Snake Eyes finds himself faced with a dilemma. Under any normal circumstances, up against such deadly odds, he would call on Blue Flight to disengage and count himself lucky that his team had made it out unscathed. But that message from the pilot of the Dead Reckoning, there was a ring of truth to the woman's words, and such information would certainly explain the Dominion's dogged pursuit of that little craft. He is wheeling his warbird around, staying one step ahead of the incoming weapons fire when he spots the imminent collision.
Reckoning! Pull up! Pull up!
He cries into the comm, but it's too late. Even from this distance, he hears the sickening crunch of impact over the roar of the wind. Then everything is happening at once.
Today is a good day to die!
The big Urian bellows, and before Snake Eyes has the chance to order him not to, he's diving, heading directly at the stricken Dominion frigate. Its two remaining guns open up, their crews having spotted the suicidal attack run. At the same instant, the comm crackles into life.
All Liga aircraft, this is Mina Montesario. I think we're stuck fast. If we don't get out of this, the intel we carry must make it back to the League. The Dominion is assembling an armada of heavy bombers in secret below the continent of conflict. They are being stocked with enough infernal powder to lay waste to an entire continent, and their target is Tanth.
Then it's Gadget on the comm.
Order, Skipper.
Snake Eyes swears softly to himself and then comes to a decision.
We follow Backfire's lead. Target the damaged frigate. Come at it from the east, I'll approach from the west. Take out those guns and give our new friend the time she needs to break free. Just be careful to avoid hitting her in the process.
The three planes descend upon the stricken airship in deadly concert, coming in fast before the Vengeance has time to bring her guns to bear. Taken completely by surprise by Blue Flight's boldness, the other two airships can only bank hard, offering limiting covering fire that the Warbirds easily evade. The strikes are precise and coordinated. Despite the frigate's heavy armour, between Snake Eyes and Backfire, one gun turret erupts into choking black smoke. As she pulls up from her strafing run, Gadget releases a drop bomb that detonates with sufficient force to violently rock the airship. She catches the briefest glimpse of a figure, no doubt a panicked gunner, emerging from a turret and hurling themselves in desperation onto the hull of the Dead Reckoning. Insane the people will try to do to survive.
Come round for a second pass.
Comes Snake Eyes' command over the comm, and the three twin-winged warbirds loop under their target, up over once more, and come back in again, intent on finishing their prey. The other airships have now come into position, however, and their heavy anti-aircraft cannon turn the sky into an inferno. "I'm taking heavy fire, Skipper," Gadget calls out as holes pepper her wings. "Not sure how long she's going to hold together."
Stay on target.
Snake Eyes growls in reply.
Stay on target.
The three tiny aircraft dive into the attack once more, weapons burning hot from sustained use. The last remaining gun turret erupts in flames beneath the withering fire of Snake Eyes' guns, to a whoop of exultation from Backfire. Once again, as she climbs away, Gadget releases her drop bomb, the last of her payload. Their aim is too good. Rather than impacting on the exterior of the Vengeance, the explosive device somehow finds one of the few hull breaches their attackers inflicted, and disappears inside the bombardment frigate. For a moment, there is silence. And then, with a detonation so bright it illuminates the midday sky, the DSS Vengeance goes up in a raging fireball that blasts the hapless frigate to smithereens. Well, things started out calmly enough. Mythic, I asked, does this scene progress as intended with our Warbirds launching a strafing run upon the Vengeance? And Mythic came back with the following.
The scene is interrupted by an ambiguous event, with the meaning, free conflict.
This seemed straightforward and innocuous enough. Mina was going to let the Leaguers know about the hidden armada. After all, her vessel was wedged into the top of the Dominion frigate, and she might have felt that it was important to get that message passed on. From here, it was a simple matter of switching to the Warbirds rules and playing out the combat. Once again, Blue Flight did remarkably well, stripping their target of any offensive capacity in a couple of rounds and taking almost no damage in return. Where things went wrong was with the use of ordnance. It was always going to be a little risky launching an all-out attack on the vessel to which Mina's ship was stuck, but I figured that it needed to be done in order to reduce the risk to her, and so I took the gamble. In Warbirds, you can target your guns, but must make a random roll for where your ordnance, such as rockets or bombs, land. While this did run the risk of catching Mina in the blast zone, I figured the risk was pretty negligible. The chance of actually hitting the Vengeance with ordnance, and then actually causing it, or even less likely, Mina, damage, was so low that it seemed a risk worth taking. Sadly, I had reckoned without two important factors. The first of those, the cussedness of dice. If you have ever played a role-playing game, solo or otherwise, you will be familiar with this phenomenon. That one time you desperately need a thing, and your dice, like the vicious little polyhedral gremlins that they are, give you precisely the opposite. I'm pretty sure that if I listened closely enough, I'd be able to hear them giggling. In this case, I made a roll to attack with my drop bomb, and I scored a hit. I bumped up the damage, knowing that the ship was heavily armoured throughout, and rolled for location. And naturally, I rolled the bomb bay, and inflicted precisely the right amount of damage to completely destroy it. I gave myself one more chance. Just because the bomb bay was destroyed didn't automatically mean that the payload of 20 highly explosive blast bombs within it would erupt. Right, Mythic? In fairness, it was pretty likely that they would, and so I rolled with pretty likely odds at a chaos factor of 7, and Mythic said,
"Oh yes, they definitely explode. No question about it."
Well, of course they do. Thank you so much, Mythic.
You're quite welcome.
I fear that sarcasm is entirely wasted on my GM emulator. Either that, or it's better at it than I am. Anyway, here we are, facing the very real prospect of having lost the original protagonist of my series, along with her allies, in a huge explosion above the Void Sea. Because, make no mistake, if the dice decide a PC's time is up, then no one is immune. Not even Mina. Can she possibly survive? Is this the end of her story? I hope you'll join me to find out. Next time. You have been listening to The Lone Adventurer, a solo RPG podcast played, written and performed by me, Carl White. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider telling your friends about it or leaving a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. It really is a huge help. You can follow me on BlueSky at theloneadventurer.bsky.social. Email me at theloneadv@gmail.com, or follow my blog at carlillustration.wordpress.com. You can find show notes for this episode and all others at the loneadventurer.podbean.com, where I include any links mentioned in the episode, as well as mechanics information. I also include a link to a full episode transcript. The story will continue in the next episode of The Lone Adventurer. Thank you for listening.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.